Wow, so I cannot believe that it's been nearly a year since I left my 9 to 5 government job to pursue entrepreneurship full time. And this was mainly accomplished through this YouTube channel, along with both my stock and real estate ventures. And I must say that this year has been one of the most rewarding years of my life for sure. However, it's also been extremely challenging in a way that I hadn't necessarily anticipated. Being a full time entrepreneur has been absolutely fantastic and lives up to my expectations fully for what I've been striving to achieve over these past 3 to 4 years. So sitting here right now filming this video about how it's already been a year is extremely surreal, and I still cannot thank enough everyone who's been watching my channel and supporting this channel along the way. Circling back to last November though, and that's actually when I had made the transition away from my full-time 9 to 5 government position, and my gosh, has this year ever flown by. And it was actually a couple months after the fact that I released that first video where I spoke about my experience of how I managed to actually make this a reality and the blueprint that I followed. That video got an extremely good response from the audience, and it's one of the videos I'm most proud of having made and released on the channel, as I really wanted to just make it to inspire anyone else who may have been in that situation and to just prove that it actually is something that is feasible no matter what your situation is currently. Making that leap was a huge decision, took over a year of planning, and I had a lot of people at the time telling me that that wasn't a good idea. Even still to this day on that video, I'll have some people sometimes telling me that that was a terrible idea. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that you and only you can make an executive decision to try and find your own path, even if every decision along the way isn't necessarily the right decision in the larger picture of your life. Just trying to do better every single day and achieving your version of an ideal will help you gain more experience and ultimately guide you towards your destination. And so I made that video to, yes, solidify this new reality for myself and stay accountable, but the main goal was to give all of you an actual concrete game plan and blueprint that worked for me. After almost a year though, things in my life have definitely changed, and I've certainly had my fair share of struggles along the way. So as always, in an effort to be as transparent as possible with the audience, I wanted to walk through some of these with you and share my thoughts as to how I'm overcoming them. Let's just dive into it. The main struggle that I've been dealing with most over the past year has been continuing to find purpose and passion really in my everyday activities, and then translating that over into consistent daily motivation and goals that tap into this idea of growth and moving forward in life. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, whoa, Griffin, chill, weren't you just saying that you're living out your dream life and after all you make YouTube videos on the internet? You sound like you're trying to write out your next paper for your Philosophy 102 class. Didn't you already graduate from university? And yeah, I have graduated, but over the past year, I have definitely been challenged with the idea of finding that greater purpose and also the why to my business and my activities, which I've been blown away at realizing now that I have left my job, how incredibly powerful and motivating a quote-unquote why truly is for guiding someone's life. So during my time at university and throughout the entire course of time that I spent at that job, I constantly had this narrative on replay of, Griffin, you need to find a way to get out of the corporate life. After all, this just isn't for you. It was not really resonating with who I was. And I absolutely cannot make this up. This massive goal that I had of becoming a full-time entrepreneur was something that was just so powerful and important to me that it literally became woven into who I was and represented from ages pretty much 20 to around 24. Over this 4-year period, I was so laser focused on making this huge goal of mine a reality that it pretty much consumed who I was as a person and occupied like 90% of my mental space throughout the day, or just ways that I could make this a reality, that is. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. And what this ultimately resulted in was that I was just this absolute workhorse doing 40 hours of work during the day and then another full-time job and a half after work on my YouTube channel and my other branding business at the time that I had for YouTube influencers. Other than, of course, spending time with my girlfriend, it's safe to say that my social life during this period of time was greatly sacrificed. Rather, I was just constantly working on my projects to make this goal and dream a reality. And the concept of burned out here does not even apply. I'm not saying this is something to strive for, but I was completely fried day in and day out from just overworking over years of time, to the point where in some moments it was actually even unhealthy. But this goal was just so strong and so important to me deep down that it was kind of almost to a point where my body and my mind was just in fight or flight mode, because I could not foresee myself continuing to stay there for another 5 to 10 years. It just was not written in my timeline. All of this to say that the point being is that the human mind is absolutely incredible. And when you set your mind to a goal that is tied to a greater purpose and not just extrinsic motivators like money or any type of compensation, well, your mind will do anything and everything in its capacity to find solutions and paths to make this transcend into your reality. And now, with some retrospect, almost a year later, and having self-reflected quite a bit on this topic, I can comfortably say that this was by far the greatest goal I had ever set myself to achieve, because it was rooted in intrinsic motivation. In fact, I recently just finished this book called Drive by Daniel H. Pink, and although it was somewhat of a drier read because it's backed by a ton of research and stuff, the general gist of the book is that individuals are significantly more motivated by intrinsic reasons, intrinsic values, and motivators than anything extrinsic. So money, vacation time, whatever. And autonomy is one of the most important elements that contribute to this self-fulfillment and intrinsic motivators. So that was definitely something really interesting that opened my eyes and realized, and well, I was able to realize why I felt the way I did back when I had that 9 to 5 that just was not necessarily speaking to who I was as a person. I wanted to make videos about things I was passionate about, investing and other topics, and share them with an audience so that we can have a dialogue here, and just something that I felt proud to do day in and day out. Ironically though, it's this exact concept of intrinsic motivation that I have been battling with since transitioning away from my job. Because if you think of it, I'm now at this new baseline, right? Where I was able to achieve this monumental goal of mine, and that was really the intrinsic motivation at the time. But now that I've achieved it, I'm at this baseline where I need to find new and interesting alternative ways to find that same level of drive so I can stay as hungry as I was before. It's funny because now that I have significantly more time to actually work on my craft and do what I love, which is making these videos, well, for the first 6 months, I can comfortably say that I felt probably 10 to 20% less motivated than before taking that transition away from the job. Don't get me wrong, in no way am I complaining about this. I absolutely love the situation I'm in right now and love what I'm doing, but from an actual deep down internal intrinsic motivation, well, that grit of waking up at 4:30 a.m. every day to get after it has been something that I've had a hard time maintaining. But the idea of becoming fully financially free is, I would say, now what's pushing me forward each and every day. Building up my portfolio of properties and paper assets to a point where they throw off enough passive income monthly to fully cover my expenses and then some. It's something that I'm looking to now achieve, so that if I do want to take some time off, well, I'm not necessarily worried about how I will fully cover my expenses. Basically, reinventing the narrative that plays in your own head though as to why you're working on your craft every single day is something that I think is extremely important to take some time each month even to think about, so that you can realign your goals and your purpose. I'd love to hear your thoughts and mindset around this very topic. Make sure to comment down below how you've been able to reinvent your purpose over time and maintain that hunger and that drive over an extended period of time. Let's now get into the second part of the video, where we will be speaking about money and some things that I have been doing over this past year, considering the fact that, well, I do not have as much of a consistent income stream. And now that I'm an entrepreneur, income is extremely variable on a month-to-month basis. The first thing I quickly realized, and I did somewhat know this going into it, was that I sort of traded one job for another, being the time that I was trading for the work that I did at that government job. And now I've traded that for time that I'm spending out on my day to work on videos so that I can release that to the audience. So although not an actual job, I sort of traded one thing for another in terms of the active income source. And while I love what I'm doing right now 100 times more than what I was doing prior to this, well, it still has its own set of challenges and hurdles. Being a YouTuber might look like sunshine and rainbows all the time, but honestly, you're in this constant battle all the time about having or trying to balance content that you want to be making and you actually feel proud about, also balancing that with what the audience wants to see, and then throw on top of that trying to appeal to this YouTube algorithm, which is constantly changing and ultimately impossible to pinpoint down to an exact science. Some channels seem to have it, however, it's this constant battle of trying to appeal to all three of these people or things all at the same time, and it's definitely mentally draining. Of course, the most important thing is always to make content that appeals to your viewers and audience. So that's really where I try to focus most of my energy, but it's still this constant struggle and juggling essentially of all three of these stakeholders. But I will leave you with this: being an entrepreneur and having that variability in monthly income, something that I cannot stress enough, no matter what your main active income source is, whether or not it's from a job, from a business, flipping houses, whatever it might be, the importance of trying to set aside at a minimum 6 months worth of your expenses, and if not more. I'm trying to strive for 1 year's worth of expenses, and actually this is something that I achieved last month, where now I have over a year's worth of all my expenses set aside in an account in case something happens and I'm essentially not able to make the same amount of income on a monthly basis that I've been now used to. Accomplishing this through your main income source and then also complementary secondary income sources is something that I think is extremely powerful. And in fact, I made a video just the other day that you can check out right here if you're interested, about the different sources of income that I've managed to create over the past couple of years, and hopefully that can spark up some ideas for how you could implement some of these in your own life. As a small business owner though, the importance of putting aside a hefty emergency fund is something that I really value, and even though I could have that money invested in the market, the peace of mind of knowing that I have that nest egg set aside is invaluable, really. Of course, being an entrepreneur has a lot more potential upside for income. However, it's also a lot more stressful, and you're always on your feet trying to find the next way that you're going to be able to make and generate more income. So for example, last year, there's 1 month in particular that I made almost 80% of my entire yearly income from my government job. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that so that you can see that there is a lot more upside potential. However, in some of these past months when I've had significantly less traction and views on my YouTube channel, which is my primary income source, well, my income is way down to the point where, you know, it's still enough to live. However, had I not taken those precautions ahead of time, I wouldn't necessarily be feeling as financially comfortable. So if you do aspire to quit your job one day, a couple things that I would highly recommend. Number one, work on, first of all, having at least 6 months worth of expenses set aside. That's super basic. Number two, make sure that you have multiple income streams, at least 2 to 3 minimum, so that if you do have one that is somewhat lacking some months, well, you're able to compensate with the other income sources. And I would argue that these 3 income sources minimum should equate to, at the very least, probably 80% of what you're making at your job prior to leaving. For myself, having set up multiple income streams was one of the main factors that made me feel comfortable with taking that leap. For example, one of these income streams being rental income, while I'm not actually taking that money out and utilizing it to pay for my expenses, well, on paper, the cash flow alone was almost enough to pay for most of my living expenses. So that's just a way that you can sort of mentally prepare yourself to take that leap and be comfortable with the decision.